The evening sky had turned a deep purple over Chicago's skyline as Keanu Reeves stepped out of his taxi. He paid the driver, adding a generous tip with a quiet, "Thanks," and stood for a moment on the sidewalk. The cool autumn air felt good after a long day of filming. He was tired, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from 12 hours of action sequences and emotional scenes. Keanu glanced down at his phone, checking the name of the restaurant one more time. Little Italy Cucina. It wasn't fancy or trendy, just a small family-owned place tucked between taller buildings in Chicago's West Loop. That's exactly why he'd chosen it. After weeks of being surrounded by film crews' cameras and the constant buzz of production, he craved something normal. Somewhere he could just eat a good meal without being Keanu Reeves, the movie star. He pushed open the heavy wooden door and was immediately enveloped by the warm smell of garlic, tomato sauce, and freshly baked bread. The restaurant was packed, buzzing with conversation and laughter. A small bell jingled above the door as he entered, but nobody looked up. That was the beauty of places like this. People were too caught up in their own lives and conversations to notice him. The hostess, a young woman with curly hair pulled back in a loose bun, was frantically sorting through reservation cards at her podium. She looked up briefly as Keanu approached, stress evident in her eyes but no recognition. "Perfect. Hi there," Keanu said softly. "Table for one, please." The hostess bit her lip, glancing around the crowded restaurant. "I'm so sorry, sir, we're completely booked tonight. There's at least an hour wait for walk-ins." Keanu nodded understandingly. He was about to turn and leave when the hostess's eyes lit up. "Wait, I think we just had a cancellation. Let me double-check." She flipped through her cards again, then smiled. "You're in luck. We do have one small table. It's by the kitchen, though. Not our best spot." "That's completely fine," Keanu replied with genuine gratitude. "I don't mind the noise." The hostess grabbed a menu and led him through the maze of tables. The restaurant was cozy and authentic, red and white checkered tablecloths, walls covered with old black and white photos of Italy, and strings of small lights crisscrossing the ceiling. Conversations and laughter surrounded him as they weaved between tables. A few heads turned with that familiar look of, "Is that?" before returning to their meals. The table was indeed small and tucked into a corner near the swinging kitchen doors. Waiters rushed in and out, carrying steaming plates of pasta and pizza. The hostess placed the menu on the table. "Your server will be with you in just a moment. Enjoy your meal," she said with a quick smile before hurrying back to her station. Keanu settled into his chair, removed his black jacket and draped it over the back. He ran a hand through his slightly messy dark hair and let out a deep breath. For the first time all day, he felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. The chaos of the busy restaurant was oddly comforting. It reminded him that most of the world was just going about their normal lives, unconcerned with movie premieres and press junkets. He glanced around, taking in the details of the place. At a nearby table, an elderly couple shared a bottle of wine, their hands occasionally finding each other's across the table. A family with 2 young children sat against the far wall, the parents helping the kids twirl spaghetti onto their forks. A group of friends in their 20s laughed loudly at a joke, clinking their glasses together in a toast. A young waiter approached his table, notepad in hand. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" "Just water for now." "Thanks," Keanu replied, opening the menu. "Coming right up," the waiter said, already turning toward his next table. Keanu scanned the menu, feeling his stomach growl in anticipation. Everything sounded good after a day of grabbing quick bites between scenes. The restaurant's specialty seemed to be their homemade pasta, and Keanu was just deciding between the linguine with clams and the classic spaghetti carbonara when his thoughts were interrupted. "Excuse me," a deep voice said. Keanu looked up to see a tall man standing beside his table. The man wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a black vest. A small name tag on his chest read Tony Manager. Tony's face was flushed, his brow furrowed with what looked like frustration. "Is everything okay?" Keanu asked. Tony crossed his arms. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your seating." "Oh?" Keanu raised an eyebrow. The hostess mentioned this was from a cancellation. Tony's frown deepened. No, that's not possible. We don't have any cancellations tonight. This table is reserved for someone very important who's running late. A food critic from the Chicago Tribune. Keanu nodded slowly, understanding dawning on him. I see. No problem. I can wait for another table. I'm sorry, but we're completely booked tonight. Every table is reserved, Tony said, his voice tight. His eyes darted nervously toward the front door, then back to Keanu. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. A few diners at nearby tables glanced over, their conversations quieting as they sensed the tension. The waiter who had taken Keanu's drink order returned with a glass of water, saw the manager standing there and quickly retreated. There must be some misunderstanding, Keanu said calmly. Your hostess seated me here. I'm happy to move if there's another spot available. Tony's jaw clenched. Look, sir, I don't want to make a scene, but this table is reserved for Richard Walsh, the food critic. His review could make or break this restaurant we've been preparing for weeks. I understand completely, Keanu replied, keeping his voice level. But I was seated here by your staff. Perhaps there's a compromise? Tony's patience was clearly wearing thin. The stress of the busy night and the importance of the food critic's visit were evident in the way his right eye twitched slightly. The dining room had grown noticeably quieter as more people tuned into the conversation. Sir, I don't have time for this, Tony said, his voice rising. We need this table now. I need to ask you to leave immediately. Keanu looked around, aware that they were becoming the center of attention. This was exactly the kind of scene he'd hoped to avoid. He considered explaining who he was, but that would only make things worse. More attention, more disruption to everyone's evening. All right, he said quietly, reaching for his jacket. No problem. As he stood up, Tony took a step back, gesturing toward the exit with an impatient wave of his hand. Thank you for your understanding, he said, though his tone suggested he felt anything but grateful. Keanu slipped his jacket on and began walking toward the door, weaving between tables once again. This time, more heads turned. The restaurant had grown unnaturally quiet. Conversations paused mid-sentence as diners watched the tall man in black being escorted out by the agitated manager. Near the front of the restaurant, a teenage girl's eyes widened in recognition. She tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered something. The whisper spread like wildfire through the restaurant. Is that? No way. It's him, Keanu Reeves. Tony's footsteps faltered behind him as the whispers reached his ears. Keanu kept walking, head down, hoping to make it to the door before the situation escalated further. He'd almost reached the exit when he heard Tony's voice again, this time with a completely different tone. Wait, sir, Mr. Reeves. The manager's voice cracked slightly. Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. Keanu turned slowly, finding Tony standing frozen in place, his face having drained of all color. The manager's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Around them, phones were already appearing in hands, discreetly aimed in their direction. It's fine, Keanu said quietly. Really, no harm done. But Tony was shaking his head, horror dawning in his eyes as he realized what he'd done. Please, Mr. Reeves, this is a terrible misunderstanding. Of course we have a table for you. The best table in the house. The hostess had appeared beside Tony, her eyes wide with shock. Oh my God, she whispered. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Keanu glanced around the restaurant. Every eye was on him now. The peaceful anonymity of his evening completely shattered. Some diners were already standing up, phones in hand, hoping for a picture or autograph. This was exactly what he'd wanted to avoid. Thank you, but I think I'll find somewhere else tonight, he said gently. He reached out and briefly touched Tony's shoulder. No hard feelings, I hope your food critic enjoys his meal. With that, Keanu turned and pushed open the door, stepping back into the cool Chicago night. The bell jingled cheerfully above him as the door swung shut, cutting off the sound of Tony's continued apologies and the growing buzz of excited conversations inside the restaurant. Keanu stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in his pockets, and took a deep breath. The night was still young, and Chicago was full of restaurants. Somewhere in this city there had to be a quiet place where he could enjoy a simple meal in peace. Little did he know that what happened next would turn this awkward encounter into something completely unexpected. The restaurant door swung shut behind Keanu, the cheerful jingle of the bell a stark contrast to the awkward scene he'd just left behind. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting his jacket against the cool Chicago night air. People walked past, hurrying to dinner reservations or heading home after long workdays, most too busy with their own lives to notice him. Keanu took a deep breath and started walking. He had no particular destination in mind, just away from the restaurant and the uncomfortable attention. The streets of Chicago's West Loop were alive with the energy of a Friday night. Couples, walking hand in hand, groups of friends laughing as they spilled out of bars, the distant sound of music drifting from open doorways. He'd gone barely half a block when he heard rapid footsteps behind him. "Mr. Reeves, please wait." Keanu slowed and turned to see Tony, the restaurant manager, jogging toward him. The man's face was flushed, partly from exertion and partly, Keanu suspected, from embarrassment. Tony came to a stop a few feet away, breathing heavily. "Mr. Reeves," he said, catching his breath, "I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am." Keanu gave a small, understanding smile. "It's really okay. You were just doing your job." Tony shook his head vigorously. "No, it's not okay. I was rude and unprofessional. I didn't recognize you, but that's no excuse for how I behaved. I wouldn't treat anyone that way. Shouldn't treat anyone that way." A small crowd was beginning to form around them, pedestrians slowing as they recognized Keanu. Phones appeared in hands, not so discreetly aimed in their direction. "Maybe we could talk somewhere else?" Keanu suggested quietly, nodding toward the growing audience. Tony glanced around, suddenly aware of the attention they were attracting. "Yes, of course, there's a small coffee shop around the corner, much quieter." They walked in silence, Tony leading the way. The coffee shop was indeed quieter, a cozy place with warm lighting and mismatched furniture. Only a handful of customers sat inside, most focused on laptop screens or books. The rich smell of coffee filled the air. They found a table in the corner away from the windows. A waitress approached, did a double take when she saw Keanu, but professionally maintained her composure. "Just 2 coffees, please," Tony said, and the waitress nodded and walked away. Tony folded his hands on the table, looking genuinely distressed. "My wife and kids are huge fans of yours. They've seen all your movies. When I tell them I kicked John Wick out of our restaurant..." He let out a groan and put his head in his hands. Keanu chuckled softly. "Well, probably best not to phrase it exactly that way." Tony looked up, a hint of a smile breaking through his worried expression. "The thing is, Mr. Reeves..." "Keanu, please. Keanu. That restaurant is everything to me. My parents opened it 30 years ago after they came here from Italy. They saved every penny, worked 18-hour days. I grew up in that kitchen doing homework at the corner table, learning to make pasta from my grandmother." The waitress returned with their coffees, setting them down with a nervous smile before quickly retreating. "When my father got sick 5 years ago, I took over. He passed away last year, and now it's just me and my mother running the place. That food critic I mentioned, Richard Walsh, he can make or break a restaurant with one review. We've been struggling since COVID, barely staying afloat. A good review from him could change everything for us." Keanu listened intently, warming his hands around the coffee mug. "I understand that's a lot of pressure." "It's no excuse," Tony said firmly. "My father would have been ashamed of how I acted tonight. He always said the way you treat people is more important than any success." A comfortable silence fell between them as they sipped their coffee. Through the shop window, Keanu could see people passing by on the street, caught up in their own stories, their own struggles and triumphs. "You know," Keanu said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about something lately. How we're all just trying our best, carrying burdens others can't see." Tony nodded slowly. "That's true. Everyone's fighting some kind of battle." "Exactly. And sometimes all it takes is one small kindness to make a difference." Keanu set down his coffee cup. So here's what I'm thinking. Before he could continue, the coffee shop door burst open. A young woman in a restaurant uniform, the hostess from Little Italy Cucina, rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Tony, there you are," she exclaimed, hurrying to their table. "You won't believe what's happening. The place is packed, completely full. Word got out that Keanu Reeves was there, and now everyone wants to eat at the restaurant where Keanu Reeves got kicked out." Tony's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Lisa, slow down. What about Walsh, the food critic?" Lisa waved her hand dismissively. "He called to cancel. Stuck in traffic or something, but it doesn't matter. People are lining up outside. They're taking selfies by the table where Mr. Reeves sat. The chef can barely keep up with the orders." Tony looked at Keanu, bewilderment written across his face. Keanu couldn't help but laugh. "Social media," he said with a shrug. "Faster than any news channel." Lisa turned to Keanu, suddenly remembering her manners. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry about the mix-up earlier. I should have recognized you. Please don't worry about it. It happens all the time," Keanu assured her. Tony was shaking his head in disbelief. "I don't understand. I was awful to you, and now people are flocking to my restaurant because of it?" "People love a good story," Keanu said simply. "But listen, this gives me an idea." Tony leaned forward, curious. "What if we turn this around?" Keanu suggested. "Make something good out of an awkward situation?" Outside the coffee shop, a light rain had begun to fall, droplets racing each other down the window pane. In the soft lighting, with the rain creating a gentle backdrop, Keanu outlined his plan. As he spoke, Tony's expression transformed from confusion to surprise to growing excitement. "You would really do that?" Tony asked when Keanu finished. "For someone who was so rude to you?" Keanu smiled. "Life's too short to hold grudges. Besides, I think it could be fun." Lisa, who had been listening intently, clapped her hands together. "This is amazing. Wait until people hear about this." "Actually," Keanu said, "let's keep it quiet for now. No announcements, no social media posts. Sometimes the best moments happen when they're not planned or publicized." Tony nodded in agreement, a new respect in his eyes. "You're nothing like what I expected, you know that? Most celebrities I've met, not that I've met many, they wouldn't be so understanding." Keanu shrugged. "I've been fortunate in my life. It feels good to pass that fortune along when I can." The rain outside had intensified, drumming steadily on the roof of the coffee shop. The three of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the rain transform the city streets, washing everything clean. Finally, Tony checked his watch and stood up. "I should get back to the restaurant. My mother will be wondering where I disappeared to in the middle of our busiest night ever." He extended his hand to Keanu. "Thank you, truly." Keanu shook his hand firmly. "See you tomorrow morning then, 8 o'clock? "I'll be there," Tony promised. "With bells on." As Tony and Lisa hurried back to the restaurant, huddled under Lisa's small umbrella, Keanu remained at the table finishing his coffee. Through the rain-streaked window, he watched the city go by. Taxi lights reflecting in puddles, couples sharing umbrellas, restaurant windows glowing like warm beacons in the night. He thought about the unexpected turn the evening had taken. What had started as an embarrassing moment was transforming into something meaningful. That was the thing about life. You never knew when a wrong turn might lead you exactly where you needed to be. Keanu paid for the coffees and left a generous tip. As he stepped outside, the rain had softened to a gentle mist. He turned up his collar against the damp and began walking toward his hotel, looking forward to tomorrow and the plan he'd set in motion. Behind him, through the large windows of Little Italy Cucina, he could see the restaurant buzzing with activity, filled to capacity with curious diners. Tony moved between tables, his earlier stress replaced with a new energy as he welcomed guests and shared stories. Keanu smiled to himself. The night wasn't turning out how anyone had expected, and sometimes those were the best nights of all. What nobody in the restaurant knew, what not even Tony and Lisa knew yet, was exactly what Keanu had planned for tomorrow. As he walked through the misty Chicago streets, Keanu couldn't help but feel excited about what was to come. The unfortunate incident at the restaurant was about to transform into something nobody would forget, least of all the man who had so unceremoniously kicked him out. Morning arrived in Chicago with clear skies and golden sunlight that made the puddles from last night's rain shimmer like mirrors. The city was quieter on Saturday morning, a gentle hush before the weekend burst into full swing. Keanu woke early, his body still on filming schedule despite having the day off. He went for a run along the lakefront, the cool morning air filling his lungs as the sun rose over Lake Michigan. Running had always helped him think, and today he had plenty to consider. The plan he'd proposed to Tony last night was taking shape in his mind, details falling into place with each step along the path. By 7:30, he was showered and dressed in simple jeans and a dark blue sweater, nothing that screamed celebrity. He stopped at a small bakery near his hotel, picking up a box of pastries, a peace offering for his morning meeting. Little Italy Cucina looked different in the daylight, smaller somehow. Its red awning faded from years in the sun, the gold lettering on the window slightly chipped. But there was something charming about its worn edges, a sense of history and perseverance. A handwritten closed sign hung on the door, but Keanu could see movement inside. He knocked lightly, and a moment later, Tony appeared, unlocking the door with a warm smile that erased any lingering awkwardness from the night before. "Right on time," Tony said, holding the door open. "Come in, please." The restaurant was empty, chairs still stacked on tables from the night cleanup. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air and illuminating the faded family photographs that lined the walls. "I brought breakfast," Keanu said, holding up the bakery box. Tony's eyes lit up. "Perfect. I've got coffee brewing in the back. My mother's already here, too. She insisted on coming, and when I told her about our meeting, she's very excited to meet you." As if on cue, a small elderly woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face, deeply lined from years of smiles and worries, broke into an expression of pure delight when she saw Keanu. "Mama, this is Keanu Reeves," Tony said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Mr. Reeves, this is my mother, Rosa." Rosa's eyes widened. She pressed her hands to her cheeks. "Oh my, the movie star my son rudely kicked out in my restaurant." She hurried forward, taking Keanu's hands in hers. "I am so sorry, Mr. Reeves. My Antonio. He gets the temper from his father, not from me." "Mama," Tony protested, his face reddening. Keanu laughed, genuinely charmed. "Please, call me Keanu, and there's nothing to apologize for. Your son was just protecting your restaurant." Rosa patted his hand. "Such a gentleman. Come, we sit and have coffee. I want to hear all about this plan Antonio told me. Very mysterious, my son." They settled at a corner table, the same one Keanu had briefly occupied the night before. Rosa poured coffee from an old-fashioned percolator into mismatched cups while Tony arranged the pastries on a plate. "So," Tony said, sitting down with them, "I've been thinking about your idea all night. It's incredible, really. Are you sure you want to do this?" Keanu nodded, warming his hands around the coffee cup. "Absolutely, but it will work better if we keep it low-key. No press, no announcements." Rosa looked between them, curiosity bright in her eyes. "Someone please tell an old woman what is happening in her own restaurant." Tony turned to his mother. "Keanu wants to help us host a charity dinner here. Tomorrow night." "Tomorrow," Rosa exclaimed. "Impossible. We need weeks to prepare for something like this." "That's part of the charm," Keanu explained gently. "It's spontaneous, authentic. We'll keep it simple, a fixed menu, limited seating. The goal isn't perfection, it's connection." Rosa looked skeptical. "And people will come? On such short notice?" Keanu smiled. "I made some calls last night. I have friends in the Chicago film community who are excited to help. And after what happened yesterday, I think word will spread quickly. That's putting it mildly," Tony said with a laugh. "Our phone hasn't stopped ringing since last night. People trying to make reservations, reporters asking for statements. It's been crazy. Perfect, Keanu said. We can use that interest for something good. All proceeds from tomorrow's dinner will go to the homeless shelter down the block. I walked past it this morning. They're doing important work with very limited resources. Rosa's expression softened. My Giuseppe, Tony's father, he always gave our leftover food to that shelter, every night without fail, even when we had so little ourselves. Her eyes grew misty with memory. He would like this plan very much. Tony reached over and squeezed his mother's hand. I think so too, Mama. The three of them spent the next hour outlining the details. A simple Italian family-style menu, 20 tables, 2 seatings to accommodate more guests. Rosa would oversee the kitchen. Tony would handle the front of house, and Keanu would, well, be Keanu. I won't just sit there like some exhibition, he insisted. I want to help serve, talk with people, make it interactive. Tony looked concerned. Are you sure? People might get a bit overwhelming. Keanu shrugged. I've dealt with crowds before. The key is to set the tone early. Make it clear this isn't about taking selfies with a celebrity. It's about community, about turning an awkward moment into something meaningful. As they talked, the door to the restaurant opened despite the closed sign, and Lisa, the hostess from the night before, poked her head in. Sorry I'm late, she called, hurrying over. The bus was running behind. She stopped short when she saw the three of them huddled together. Oh, you're really here. I half thought last night was a dream. Keanu stood and pulled out a chair for her. Very real. We were just discussing tomorrow night's plan. We could use your help with the reservations. As the morning progressed, more staff arrived. The chef, 2 waiters, a busboy. Each looked surprised to find Keanu Reeves casually sitting at a table with the owners, but they quickly got caught up in the excitement of the impromptu charity event. By noon, the plan was fully formed. Lisa had set up an online reservation system, limiting it to 40 tables total between the 2 seatings. The chef had designed a family-style menu that could be prepared efficiently. Rosa had called her network of Italian grandmothers to help with the baking. I still can't believe this is happening, Tony said as they stood to leave. Yesterday I thought I'd ruined everything, and now? Life has a funny way of working out, Keanu said. Sometimes the best moments come from the worst misunderstandings. As Keanu prepared to leave, Rosa approached him with a small wrapped package. Biscotti, she explained, my special recipe, for you to enjoy later. Keanu accepted the package with genuine gratitude. Thank you, Rosa. That's very kind. She patted his cheek affectionately. You are a good man, Keanu Reeves. My Giuseppe would have liked you very much. Outside the restaurant, a small crowd had gathered. Word had somehow leaked out that Keanu was inside. As he emerged, people raised their phones calling out his name. But instead of hurrying past, Keanu paused. Hi, everyone, he said with a warm smile. Thanks for coming by. If you're interested in doing something good tomorrow night, Little Italy, Cucina is hosting a charity dinner to support the local homeless shelter. All the details will be online soon. It's not about me. It's about helping our neighbors. I hope to see some of you there. With that simple statement, he set the tone for what was to come. This wasn't going to be a circus or a publicity stunt. It was about community, about turning an awkward encounter into something meaningful. As Keanu walked away, he could hear the excited chatter behind him. The story was already evolving, no longer just about a celebrity getting kicked out of a restaurant, but about what happened afterward, about how a moment of embarrassment transformed into an opportunity for kindness. He smiled to himself, thinking about what tomorrow would bring. In his decades in Hollywood, he'd attended countless glitzy events, walked hundreds of red carpets. But somehow, this impromptu charity dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Chicago felt more significant than many of those high-profile occasions, because this wasn't about fame or publicity. It was about connection, about how a simple misunderstanding could open the door to something unexpected and beautiful. Back at his hotel, Keanu called his agent to reschedule a Monday morning meeting. He'd need to stay in Chicago an extra day to help with the cleanup after the event. His agent sighed but agreed. long accustomed to Keanu's unpredictable acts of kindness. Only you would turn getting kicked out of a restaurant into a charity event, his agent said with a laugh. It just felt like the right thing to do, Keanu replied simply. As evening approached, Keanu checked the event page Lisa had created. In less than 6 hours, all 40 tables had been reserved, with a lengthy waiting list forming. Messages were pouring in, not just from people wanting reservations, but from locals offering to help, to donate supplies, to support in any way they could. What had started as an embarrassing moment was blossoming into something none of them had anticipated, a ripple of kindness spreading outward, touching more people with each passing hour, and tomorrow, those ripples would become waves. Sunday morning arrived with a buzz of excitement in the air. Little Italy Cucina, normally closed on Sundays, was alive with activity by 6 a.m. Delivery trucks pulled up one after another, bringing extra chairs, tablecloths, flowers, and cases of wine, many donated by local businesses who had heard about the charity event. In the kitchen, Rosa directed operations like a general commanding troops, her small frame somehow filling the entire space as she moved between stations, tasting sauces and adjusting seasonings. 3 other Italian grandmothers had joined her, their hands working deftly as they prepared trays of lasagna, rolled hundreds of meatballs, and kneaded dough for fresh bread. Tony rushed around the dining room, rearranging tables to create more space while still keeping the intimate feel of the restaurant. Lisa answered a constantly ringing phone, managing the ever-growing waiting list with remarkable patience. Keanu arrived just after 8, carrying 2 trays of coffee for the staff. He wore simple black pants and a white button-up shirt, practical clothes for a night of serving food. The kitchen staff cheered when he walked in, and he responded, with a modest smile and a small bow. "I come bearing caffeine," he announced, setting down the trays. "Looks like you could all use it." Rosa emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her cheeks. "Ah, Keanu, good timing. Come, taste this sauce. Tell me if it needs more basil." Without hesitation, Keanu followed her into the kitchen, accepting a spoonful of rich tomato sauce. "Perfect," he declared after tasting it. "Reminds me of a restaurant my mother took me to when I was a kid." Rosa beamed with pride, then immediately put him to work tearing basil leaves. Keanu settled into the task happily, chatting with the kitchen staff as they worked. There was something deeply satisfying about the simple physical work, so different from the complex emotional labor of acting. By 4 o'clock, the restaurant had been transformed. White tablecloths covered the normally casual tables, small, vases of wildflowers added bursts of color, and soft Italian music played in the background. The smells from the kitchen were intoxicating. Garlic, tomatoes, fresh bread, and simmering herbs filled the air. Tony gathered the staff for a quick meeting before opening the doors. 20 people stood in a circle in the dining room. Servers, kitchen staff, volunteers from the neighborhood who had offered to help. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming together so quickly to make this happen," Tony began, his voice thick with emotion. "What started as me making a complete fool of myself." This earned a laugh from the group. "Has turned into something really special." He turned to Keanu, who stood quietly at his side. "And thank you for showing me that sometimes our worst moments can lead to our best opportunities." Keanu shook his head modestly. "I'm just happy to be part of it. Remember, tonight isn't about me. It's about the shelter down the street and the work they do. Let's make sure our guests understand that." At 5 o'clock precisely, Tony unlocked the front door. Outside, a line stretched down the block, people of all ages and backgrounds dressed in everything from jeans to cocktail attire, all waiting excitedly for the evening to begin. The first guests entered with wide eyes, clearly searching for Keanu. When they spotted him arranging bread baskets behind the counter, their faces lit up with recognition and surprise. But true to his word, Keanu set the tone immediately. "Welcome to Little Italy Cucina," he greeted them warmly. "Thank you for supporting the West Side Shelter tonight. Tony and his mother have prepared an amazing meal for you." As more guests arrived, a pattern emerged. Yes, people were excited to see Keanu Reeves in person. Yes, there were whispers and subtle phone photos. but his genuine warmth and the clear purpose of the evening created an atmosphere of respect. This wasn't a celebrity sighting. It was a community coming together. The first seating filled quickly. Keanu moved between tables, pouring water, delivering bread baskets, and chatting with guests. He asked questions about their lives, their connections to Chicago, their favorite movies, not just his own. He listened intently to their answers, making each person feel truly seen. At one table, an elderly man caught Keanu's arm as he passed. "My grandson works at that shelter," he said, his eyes misty. "They do good work there, but they've been struggling for funding. This means more than you know." Keanu knelt beside the table so he was eye level with the man. "Tell me more about your grandson's work," he said, and for the next few minutes he listened as if nothing in the world was more important than this conversation. In the kitchen, Rosa and her team worked with joyful efficiency, sending out platter after platter of food, family style, meant for sharing. Guests passed dishes around their tables, strangers becoming friends over shared meals. Between the first and second seatings, a surprise visitor arrived, Richard Walsh, the food critic, whose reservation had started the whole chain of events. He stood awkwardly at the entrance, clearly uncomfortable. Tony spotted him first and walked over, his posture stiff. "Mr. Walsh," he said formally. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." The critic cleared his throat. "I heard what was happening here. Thought I should see it for myself." He glanced around the bustling restaurant. Quite a different atmosphere from what I'm used to reviewing. "It's not about the review tonight," Tony said. "But you're welcome to stay for the second seating if you'd like. All proceeds go to the shelter." Walsh nodded, handing over his credit card. "I'd like to pay for my table and the one next to it as well. Anonymous donations." Tony's expression softened. "That's very generous. Thank you." Keanu appeared beside them, carrying a stack of clean plates. "Everything okay here?" Tony made quick introductions. "Richard Walsh, the food critic I mentioned. Mr. Walsh, Keanu Reeves." Keanu balanced the plates in one arm to shake Walsh's hand. "Nice to meet you. I hear you have quite an influence on the Chicago food scene." Walsh seemed flustered, all his professional composure momentarily forgotten. "Yes, well, what you're doing here it's quite remarkable." Keanu shrugged. "Not really. Just people helping people. Nothing special about that." But it was special, as anyone in the restaurant could see. Throughout the evening, a tip jar for the shelter had been filling rapidly. Local business owners who had come for dinner were writing checks. A group of tech workers had set up an impromptu online donation page, projecting the growing total on the wall. The second seating was even more lively than the first. Word had spread through social media about what was happening, and a crowd had gathered outside, not just people hoping for a glimpse of Keanu, but community members bringing donations for the shelter. Blankets, coats, canned food, and toiletries piled up near the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Keanu continued serving, now with a smudge of tomato sauce on his white shirt and a slight sheen of sweat on his brow. He looked happier than he had in days, completely in his element among regular people doing good work. At one point, he caught Tony's eye across the room. The restaurant manager was watching the scene with a look of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening in his family's modest restaurant. Keanu gave him a thumbs up, and Tony responded with a grateful nod. Near the end of the evening, the director of the West Side shelter arrived, having heard about the event from shelter residents who had been invited to fill any empty seats. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years of difficult but meaningful work. When Tony introduced her to Keanu, she gripped his hand firmly. "I don't care much about movies," she said bluntly, "but what you've done tonight, shining a light on our work, bringing the community together, that's real. That matters." Keanu nodded, understanding completely. "The real heroes are people like you, doing the hard work every day without recognition." As midnight approached, the last guests reluctantly prepared to leave. The tip jar had been emptied multiple times, its contents secured in the restaurant safe. The donation pile by the door had grown so large it would require multiple trips to transport everything to the shelter. The staff gathered in the kitchen for a final moment together before cleanup began. Rosa, exhausted but glowing with satisfaction, raised a glass of wine. "To new friends," she said, looking directly at Keanu, "who turn mistakes into miracles." Everyone cheered, clinking glasses together. The kitchen was a disaster. The dining room a mess of crumbs and empty plates, and every person there was completely exhausted. But there was also a palpable sense of accomplishment, of having been part of something truly meaningful. As the staff began the process of cleaning up, Keanu rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a bus tub. When Tony tried to protest, saying he'd done more than enough, Keanu shook his head. "I'm seeing this through to the end," he said simply. Outside, the Chicago night had turned cool and clear, stars visible between the tall buildings. The line of people was gone, but the impact of the evening remained. In the donations collected, in the connections formed, in the story that would be told about the night Keanu Reeves got kicked out of a restaurant and then helped transform it into the center of a community coming together. And tomorrow would bring something none of them could yet imagine. The true ripple effect of one evening of kindness, spreading outward in ways that would surprise them all. Monday morning dawned, bright and clear in Chicago. Keanu woke early in his hotel room, muscles aching pleasantly from the physical labor of the night before. They had cleaned until nearly 3 in the morning, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, and sorting the mountain of donations for the shelter. Despite the late night, he felt refreshed in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He checked his phone and found dozens of missed calls from his agent, along with a flurry of text messages ranging from confused to concerned to mildly panicked. News of the charity dinner had spread far beyond Chicago. Apparently, videos and photos were circulating online. Keanu serving pasta, chatting with guests, washing dishes in the kitchen. His agent wanted to know if this was some kind of publicity stunt and why he hadn't been informed. Keanu smiled and texted back a simple reply. "Not a stunt, just a good night. Tell you about it later." He had promised to meet Tony at the restaurant one last time before catching his afternoon flight back to the film set. As he walked through the morning streets, he noticed people looking at him differently than they had a few days ago. There was recognition, yes, but also something else. A kind of warm acknowledgement, different from the usual celebrity spotting excitement. An older man tipped his hat as Keanu passed. A young woman working at a coffee cart refused to let him pay for his coffee. "After what you did for the shelter, it's the least I can do," she said simply. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood, the story growing and changing as it passed from person to person. By the time Keanu reached Little Italy Cucina, he had been stopped 3 times by people wanting to thank him. The restaurant was closed on Mondays, but Tony was waiting outside, nursing a cup of coffee and looking tired but content. When he spotted Keanu, his face broke into a wide smile. "There he is," Tony called. "The man who saved my restaurant and possibly my sanity." Keanu laughed, accepting the bear hug Tony offered. "I think you're giving me too much credit. How are you holding up after last night?" "Exhausted, happy, still trying to process it all." Tony unlocked the door and led Keanu inside. The restaurant was spotless after their late-night cleaning efforts. Chairs neatly stacked on tables, floors gleaming. "My mother wanted to be here to say goodbye, but she's finally getting some rest. She stayed up after we left baking you these." Tony handed Keanu a paper bag filled with biscotti. Her way of saying thank you again. "Please tell her they'll make the rest of my film shoot much more enjoyable," Keanu said, genuinely touched by the gesture. They sat at what was now Keanu's table in the corner, each cradling a cup of coffee. Morning light streamed through the windows, creating pools of warmth on the worn wooden floors. "I tallied everything up this morning," Tony said, sliding a piece of paper across the table, the total raised for the shelter. Keanu looked at the number and his eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's a lot more than I expected." Tony nodded. "And that's just the cash and checks. The director of the shelter called this morning. They're still sorting through all the donated items. She said it's the largest single donation they've ever received." "That's incredible," Keanu said softly. "All because of a misunderstanding over a table? All because you chose kindness instead of taking offense," Tony corrected. Most people would have just complained online about the rude restaurant manager. You turned it into something good. Keanu shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It was a team effort. Your restaurant, your mother's food, your community. Speaking of the community, Tony said, have you seen this? He passed over his phone. Open to the morning edition of the Chicago Tribune. The headline read, From Mix-Up to Miracle, How Keanu Reeves and a Local Restaurant Fed the Soul of a Neighborhood. Below was a photo of Keanu and Rosa in the kitchen, both laughing as they prepared food together. The article was written by none other than Richard Walsh, the food critic whose reservation had started the whole chain of events. Keanu skimmed the article, which described not just the food, which Walsh had praised highly, but the atmosphere of the evening, the community coming together, the spontaneous generosity that had filled the restaurant. People will be talking about this night for years, Walsh had written. In an age of carefully orchestrated celebrity photo ops and corporate-sponsored charity events, the genuine warmth and authenticity of this evening reminded us all what community truly means. Wow, Keanu said, handing back the phone. That's quite a review. Tony laughed. Better than we could have ever hoped for. My phone's been ringing all morning. Reservations, interview requests, people wanting to know if this is going to be a regular event. And what are you telling them? Keanu asked. Tony's expression grew thoughtful. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. What if it wasn't just a one-time thing? He leaned forward, excitement clear in his voice. Not the exact same event, obviously. But what if once a month we did a special dinner for the shelter? Keep it smaller, more manageable, but regular. Build on what we started. Keanu nodded slowly, considering the idea. I think that's brilliant. The shelter needs consistent support, not just one big night. Obviously, we wouldn't expect you to be part of it again, Tony added quickly. You have your own life, your career. Actually, Keanu said, I film in Chicago pretty regularly. I can't promise I'll always be available, but when I am in town, I'd be happy to help out. Tony's face lit up. Really, that would be amazing. And even when I'm not here, Keanu continued, I'd like to support what you're doing. Maybe we could get other local celebrities involved. Make it a rotating thing. As they talked, the plan expanded and evolved. Tony grabbed a notepad and started jotting down ideas. Themed dinners based on different regions of Italy. Cooking classes where shelter residents could learn skills for food service jobs. A mentorship program for young people interested in the restaurant business. You know, Tony said, pausing in his writing, my father always said our restaurant was about more than just food. He believed we were feeding souls, not just bodies. I think I lost sight of that somewhere along the way, getting caught up in reviews and ratings. He looked around the empty restaurant, seeing it with new eyes. This place has always been the heart of my family. Now it can be a heart for the larger community, too. Keanu watched Tony's transformation with quiet satisfaction. This was the true power of kindness, not just in the moment, but in how it changed people's paths moving forward. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Lisa, the hostess, peeked in, followed by several other staff members. Though it was their day off, they had all come to say goodbye to Keanu and to talk about the charity dinner program. We've been texting all morning, Lisa explained. Everyone wants to be part of this going forward. What followed was an impromptu planning session, with ideas flowing freely around the table. The young busboy suggested partnering with his school's culinary program. One of the waiters, who was also a part-time web designer, offered to create a dedicated website for the initiative. Lisa proposed a simple name, Table for Everyone. Keanu mostly listened, occasionally offering suggestions but recognizing that this was their project now, their vision to shape and grow. His unexpected collision with Tony had sparked something, but the fire that was building belonged to this community. When it was finally time for Keanu to leave for the airport, the entire staff walked him outside. The morning had turned into early afternoon, the Chicago streets busy with people going about their Monday routines. A small crowd had gathered across the street, watching curiously, but maintaining a respectful distance. I don't know how to thank you, Tony said, his voice thick with emotion. You turned the worst moment of my professional life into this. He gestured to his staff, his restaurant, the article on his phone. Keanu smiled, the kind of genuine smile that rarely appeared in his publicity photos. Just keep it going. That's all the thanks I need. He shook hands with each staff member, exchanged a warm hug with Lisa, and promised to check in on their progress. As Keanu walked toward the waiting taxi, Tony called after him. You'll always have a table here, Keanu Reeves, no reservation needed. Keanu turned and gave a final wave before sliding into the taxi. As they pulled away from the curb, he looked back at the group standing outside Little Italy Cucina, laughing, talking excitedly, already planning their next steps. The restaurant's faded red awning seemed brighter somehow, its gold lettering catching the midday sun. On the ride to the airport, Keanu's phone buzzed with a text from his agent. Whatever you did in Chicago, it's everywhere.
Jimmy Fallon's team wants you on the show to talk about it. Keanu typed back. Not interested in talking about it on TV. It wasn't about publicity. His agent replied almost immediately. That's exactly why everyone wants to hear about it. Authenticity
Is rare. Keanu put his phone away without responding. He didn't need to explain or amplify what had happened. The ripples were already spreading on their own. Through the shelter receiving much-needed support, through Tony's restaurant finding a new purpose, through each person who had been part of the evening carrying the experience forward in their
own way. What had begun with a misunderstanding and an embarrassing moment had transformed into something beautiful and ongoing. And that, Keanu thought as the Chicago skyline receded behind him, was the real magic of human connection. How
the smallest interactions could lead to the most unexpected journeys.